Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Sam Brownback, Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom.
Good morning, everybody. We are delighted to have you here. I've said previously, this is for me like Christmas Day, and I'm getting ready to open the presents. Just excited to have everybody here. I know that doesn't translate into all faiths, but I hope you'll kind of get the concept here that in your faith that there's a present time and you get to do that as well. We are ecstatic. This event sold out, as you can tell. We had to close registration 3 weeks ago. There's just we've hit a nerve here that people want religious freedom and they want it now. And they're willing to come together and fight for it. So thank you. There is one person responsible for seeing that this takes place. He was the person that authorized the Ministerial last year, and as soon as he saw it happen, he said, we're going to do it again next year, bigger and better. It is Mike Pompeo, the United States 70th Secretary of State. He is the one that's done it. He's a personal friend. We happen to both be from Kansas, that Midwestern state that right in the middle of the country, if you don't know where that is. And he's a delightful man. But more than being the Secretary of State, he's a patriotic American who believes in human dignity and religious freedom for everyone. He's smart. He's tough. He's a former Sunday school teacher and tank commander. He's a graduate of both West Point and Harvard Law, at the top of his class in both, and he is the person that's called this ministerial together. Please welcome Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Good morning, everyone. I want to take it all in. This is a fantastic group. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to the State Department and to the hundreds of passionate advocates from overseas, some of whom are joining us in the overflow room as well, who couldn't make it into this auditorium. Welcome to the United States of America as well. I'm honored to kick off the second ministerial. Ambassador Brownback, thank you so much for putting it together. Thank you for the kind words. It's not incongruent to be both a tank commander and a Sunday school teacher. I'll get to that in a moment. Look, we've invited more than 100 foreign delegations, more than 1,000 representatives here. And I want to just be here as we kick this off today for a moment to say my personal welcome. I'll speak to you more throughout your time here. We've got folks from civil society and from Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Falun Gong, and other secular backgrounds. We welcome you all. You all traveled from far corners, distant places around the world. Later this week, we'll be joined by the Vice President and other distinguished guests. They all appreciate you coming here together to work with us on this important mission. I want to thank everyone here who has committed a part of their life to helping those who are persecuted and to defending the unalienable right to practice one's religion and follow their conscience and to take care of their soul. Thank you all for that. As some of you know, I just launched a commission, the Commission on Unalienable Rights, to ground our understanding of human rights, rights like religious freedom, in our nation's founding principles here in the United States. I hope that this ministerial will inform that discussion. And despite our many differences, everyone here agrees on the need for religious pluralism. We all agree that fighting so that each person is free to believe, free to assemble, and to teach the tenets of his or her own faith is not optional. Indeed, it is a moral imperative that this be permitted. All people from every place on the globe must be permitted to practice their faith openly in their homes, in their places of worship, in the public square, and believe what they want to believe. This week, we need input from all of you on how we can best advance that religious freedom. In closing, I want you to know that America's commitment to religious freedom will never waver. We stand with you and for you in each stage of this fight. Thank you again for being here. I look forward to seeing many of you in the hours and days ahead. Thank you, Ambassador Brownback, for bringing us all together. Good luck. Have a great visit.
We're going to have a brief video presentation that'll kick off the entire event. Let's go to the video.
The right of an individual to act consistently with his or her conscience is at the heart of the human experience.
But today, we are far from the ideal that everyone has the right
to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion.
ये मैयार हमले की जद में है।
Persecution, repression, and discrimination on the basis of religion, belief, or non-belief are a daily reality for many. It is time to address these challenges directly.
Every person everywhere has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion.
Әр қандақ адамның әр қандақ дінге итқат қылыш, итқат қылмаслық, яки өзінің діни итқатыны өзгертіш әркінлігі болады.
Religious freedom is universal and inalienable, and states must respect and protect this human right.
Las personas por nuestra humanidad compartimos derechos y aspiraciones comunes.
No debería haber en ninguna parte discriminación o persecución a causa de la religión o fe practicada por la persona.
हर शख्स कानूनी तौर पर मसावी तहफ़्फ़ुज़ का हकदार है, कतई नज़र इसके कि उसका ताल्लुक किसी मज़हब से है या किसी मज़हब से ताल्लुक है या नहीं.
Quyền công dân, các nhân quyền và những quyền tự do căn bản khác. Mọi người đều có quyền hưởng thụ, không phân biệt màu da, chủng tộc, tôn giáo, tín ngưỡng hay thành phần xã hội.
종교의 자유는 신앙을 가지고 있는 사람이나 그렇지 않은 사람 모두 자신들이 속한 사회의 담론에 참여할 수 있는 자유를 포함합니다.
A state's establishment of an official religion or traditional faith should not impair religious freedom or foster discrimination toward adherents of other religions or non-believers.
Defending the freedom of religion is the collective responsibility of the global community. It is essential for the achieving peace and stability within nations and among nations.
Where religious freedom is protected, other freedoms also flourish. Where these protections are absent, we find conflict, instability, and terrorism.
The freedom to live out one's faith is a God-given human right belonging to everyone.
Governments cannot justly take it away.
Rather, every nation shares the solemn responsibility to defend and protect religious freedom.
All those individuals that you saw in that video were people who had been persecuted for their faith at one time or another, and a number of them spoke last year at this ministerial. We are truly delighted that you're here. Much effort has been put into making this a very special week for the global religious freedom movement. This is the largest human rights event ever hosted at the State Department and the largest religious freedom event ever done in the world. I hope you can sense and feel some of the history and the importance, really, of this moment and this moment in time. A global human rights movement centered on religious freedom is being launched from this meeting. That's our intent. You're here at the inception. But after this, we ask that you take your station around the world to protect this fundamental freedom. This right extends to all, everywhere, all the time. It is a God-given right governments must protect if their people are to prosper. Most people around the world profess a faith and experience a deep need to nurture that call from within. Now, governments, of course, are not religious institutions, but they are expected to protect religious spaces and the right of individuals to practice their beliefs, without which the faithful cannot thrive. Government, therefore, provides a key role for people of faith around the world. But the situation is grim. Although most of the world is religious, 80% of the world's population live in a religiously restrictive place. It's time, it is past time to bring down these religious restrictions so that the iron curtain of religious persecution can come down for one and all, and it comes down now. Just really imagine the burst of freedom most of the world's population would experience, if religious freedom were protected. Imagine the prosperity we can create together if our world was put on a path of growth of religious freedom. First, of course, we need to believe that this is possible and it can happen. In fact, it must happen for humans to reach their aspirations for peace and for eternity. Second, we need to remember we all already have a common foundation. The countries of the world agree on religious freedom for all. It is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that you'll see posted around this conference. It is also in the Constitution of most countries. Article 18 of that Declaration of Human Rights states this, and it's very clear: everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Very clear, very broad, and for everybody. Under international law, even during a time of public emergency, states cannot derogate from their obligation to protect religious freedom. What is abundantly clear today is that this right is not experienced by many people around the world. And that's where you come in. We need your activism. We need your passion. We need you to boldly fight for religious freedom, for yourself and all of those who profess your faith, and taking it this essential step forward, joining together to fight with those who profess different faiths. This is a right that only exists if all experience it. This is not an exercise here in trying to achieve some sort of common theology. We don't agree on that. This is an exercise to protect a common human right, religious freedom. We seek to have all the religions and governments of the world come together around this concept that religious freedom for everyone, everywhere, and all the time is their right. So join us in this vision. Let's determine to fight for each other's God-given right to religious freedom. Let this be the beginning of a global grassroots movement for religious freedom. Let this be the time the world's faiths come together to stand for each other's ability to exist, and to exist peacefully, without fear. Let's bring all our faiths alive and respect, even love one another, no matter what we believe. We all are part of a common humanity. The United States seeks to partner with religious and civil society groups to advance this cause. This administration sees the killing, imprisonments, harassment, and persecution on the basis of religious beliefs around the world, and we see it as a global crisis that has received far too little attention, a global crisis that we are determined to reverse. Now, whether Baha'is or Buddhists, Christians, Hindu, Jews, Muslim, Yazidis, Zoroastrians, or others, and there are many other faiths represented here, or no faiths at all, people from every religion and belief experience persecution somewhere. And often, it's deadly. Yet if all the faiths stand together in agreement for one another, I'm convinced that we can change the world. Deaths would go down. Imprisonments would decline. freedom of worship would flourish. So my message to you in brief is united we do stand. Divided we fall, and often we fall in catastrophic, even sometimes genocidal ways. When will it stop? We toured the Holocaust Museum yesterday with a group of people that were persecuted, a place that we said is a monument, never again. And yet there were people there touring it that had been persecuted simply for their faith. When will it stop? Let the answer to that question begin here, and it stops now. We will help stop it. You will help stop it. You will push. We will push together to stop this persecution, and stop it now. We can. You can. At this ministerial, we will explore the new and the old, new ways of supporting the rights of religious minorities, including in the areas of development aid and business formation. We will study the new ways religious adherents are persecuted through high-tech systems like facial recognition systems and the use of artificial intelligence. The future of oppression is dark. It may involve fewer people being locked up, but more people marginalized from society. In that future, you might see or get a low social credit score by going to the wrong church or to a mosque, and that prevents you or your family and friends from accessing schools, getting a job, or even being able to buy and sell. Technology is morally neutral, but it can be used by good or by evil. Another goal of our time together is drawing greater awareness of the discrimination and persecution people face around the world. If you see something wrong, speak out about it. Much evil is perpetuated by good people not speaking out. We also want to encourage everyone here to find ways to bind together in your communities and nation. One avenue is by starting religious freedom roundtables in your home community or nation, where religious groups and actors can regularly come together along with civil society and government leaders to discuss and pursue ways to expand religious freedom and encourage governments to defend and protect the right. All must be welcome and invited to this table. We'd love to see 100 of these established around the world in the next 12 months. Let this be the time humanity says we are together in this right. Let this week be the moment the history books point out as the time the world determined that this human right will not be trampled on anymore. Let the movement begin. We do stand, and we stand united and determined to see this through. Now, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our first set of speakers, and it's quite a trio. These are 3 survivors of religious persecution and attack. These survivors underscore several important themes that you'll see throughout the coming days. First, persecution and violence on the account of someone's faith happens all over the world. We all have to be vigilant. Second, religious-based attacks happen to every faith. A majority faith in one country is a minority faith in another country. We have to stand together globally. Third, religious persecution is tragically not a thing of the past. These 3 courageous heroes make that clear. All of them suffered in the past year. But finally, these 3 survivors, like others you will hear testify throughout the week, are proof that courage of conviction can triumph in darkness. The first I want to welcome and introduce is Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, the rabbi and cantor for the Tree of Life congregation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's been there since the summer of 2017. Last October, a gunman began a murderous rampage in the Tree of Life synagogue, taking the lives of 11 during Shabbat services. The event was the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in the United States. Rabbi Myers courageously led the congregants out of harm's way. Since then, he has set about sending the message that love is stronger than hate. Rabbi Myers is a recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Center Medal of Valor. It is given to those whose courage and bravery shine a light in the darkest of places. The medal is inscribed with words from the Talmud. He who saves a single life, it is as if he has saved an entire world. Rabbi Myers, thank you for being here and telling us your story. Please welcome Rabbi Myers.
Thank you for taking us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's a pleasure to celebrate Hanukkah with you and open my present. I've been asked to share with you stories of the trauma felt in my community. How do I answer a parent whose child is too afraid to attend religious services? How do I console a congregant who has been unable to set foot inside any synagogue since October 27th? The perpetrator of the massacre in the Tree of Life not only stole 11 beautiful lives that he had no God-given right to do, but he stole the faith of countless Jews. Brick and mortar can be repaired. How do you repair, or in many cases, restore one's faith in God, especially when faith is not instantaneous, but evolves over the life of an individual? But lest I offer only testimony of doom and gloom in Pittsburgh, you also need to know that not only has my faith grown stronger, but so too has the faith of so very many. People have found ways to engage and even re-engage their faith through word and deed. Memorials have been created throughout the United States and indeed throughout the world. One of the victims' families recently returned from a trip to Israel, where our sister city of Carmel Misgav planted trees as a memorial. In addition to the memorial site created by the Jewish National Fund for the State of Israel that stands not far from Israel's 9/11 memorial. I have had congregants travel throughout the greater Pittsburgh area and around the country to attend memorial dedications lovingly offered by other communities and other faith groups who equally and deeply share our pain and loss. This vicious attack not only traumatized the 3 congregations housed within the Tree of Life, namely Tree of Life, New Light Congregation, and Dor Chadash. It traumatized Jewish communities throughout the world. It traumatized the entire city of Pittsburgh, and it traumatized people throughout the world. How do I know this? I know this from the thousands upon thousands of letters and emails that I received and continue to receive that express condolences, ask unanswerable questions, offer love, and struggle to find some way to make sense of the senseless. We continue to receive unsolicited works of art from caring people across the globe. I regularly share these gifts with my congregants during Friday evening services when our Sabbath begins, to demonstrate to them that we are not alone in our suffering. A vast planet of good, decent, caring people exists that reminds me daily that there are far more of the good people than the bad people. Alas, the bad get the publicity, while the good frequently toil in anonymity. And for that, I hold the media responsible for the psyche of all of us. Continued reporting on murder and mayhem must weigh heavily on so many. I know that it weighs heavily on me, so much so that I just cannot watch the late evening news before I retire for the evening. Imagine this. if the late evening news offered us 20 minutes of the wonderfully amazing acts that good people perform and hide the depressing news somewhere within the broadcast. I think, for one, that the mood of every nation would improve significantly. So the challenge is, what TV news station is brave enough to try that? The question of what governments can do to protect minorities and religious freedoms might seem easy at first blush. I can simply state, uphold your laws. Problem solved. But you cannot legislate thought, and there will always be people who break the law without any concern for the consequences. I think we have learned enough through the history of humanity that our penal codes and systems are not preventative, merely punitive. How might society address the problems of racism and bigotry? Am I now going to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? Far greater people than I have pondered these questions, yet the problems persist. I can submit this. Only when it is so totally unacceptable in society will any ill disappear. When leaders at all levels of government model the range of moral and ethical behaviors that we deem societal norms, when the media do not reward evildoers with notoriety, when all religious and civic groups forswear racism and bigotry, when perpetrators will feel ostracized by their racism and bigotry, veritable Hester Prynnes with scarlet R's and B's on their clothing, then will we see a lessening of this evil. Only when all aspects of society reject this scourge with certainty will we see the day when all peoples can enter their places of worship in safety, without a military presence, secure in the confidence that they have nothing to fear. What is keeping us from achieving this goal? Why should people listening to me at this point think I must be delirious? We lack moral leaders and the moral will as nations to finally move past the unglorious history of humanity always at war, to recognize that it just doesn't have to be this way. I submit to you that more of humanity desires to live at peace, and we all want the same things: a roof over our heads, food on the table, a good job, quality health care, a safe place to worship, a good education. All of humanity is more alike than we are different. Thomas Jefferson was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, where we read these famous words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." His idealism was magnificent. The implementation still requires much work. The unalienable rights of 11 Jews were violated by someone who felt that the Declaration of Independence didn't apply to Jews. And I dare say there are many more in the United States who feel the same way. And if it is not about the Jews, it's about the Muslims, or the Sikhs, or the Buddhists, or any other group. Other than Native Americans, everyone in the United States is descended from immigrants, if not indeed an immigrant currently. That was supposed to be our strength and the attraction for so many. There are people who came to these shores to escape persecution or to find a better life or to escape violence in their home country, or were brought here, alas, unwillingly as slaves. The grand vision of America was to be a melting pot. Other countries around the world aspire to this vision. Too many of our citizens do not know the history of their families, the hardships they faced as they immigrated to a new land, and blindly turn from those who are not just like them, creating further hardship through their bigotry and refusal to get to know their neighbors. It is only through the most basic of human communication, through compassion, empathy, and one-on-one relationships, that the artificial fences that we create to exclude anyone not like us will dissolve, to be replaced with the basic goodness that exists in humanity. I know this is possible because I have seen this in action. Only when the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I quote that from Mr. Spock, Star Trek, movie number 3. Only when the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few will humanity mature beyond racism and bigotry to love and respect for each other. I took a pledge 2 weeks after the massacre in my synagogue to not use the word hate, which I'll only use once. It's a 4-letter word in the English language, and is the case with all 4-letter words that are obscenities. You don't use it publicly or even privately, so I don't use it. So if you merely H something, just say, I don't like it. If you're not particularly enthused about the warm weather that you're being greeted with in Washington, D.C. this week, just say, I don't like it. No matter what it may be, if you don't like something, we need to tone down the severity of our language. When we say the word H, we get emotional. Emotional language leads to emotional responses. Violence, such as the murder of 11 Jews in my synagogue, the murder of 9 in Charleston in 2015, the murder of 7 Sikhs in 2012 in Oak Creek. We need to tone down our language, and it can start with us as the example. Let's not be severe in our language. Let's teach others. We can be good people in word and deed, and one by one extend that. I pray that this can happen in my lifetime. I thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Dr. Farid Ahmed survived the heinous attacks at Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, that happened just a few months ago. As the gunman opened fire, his wife rushed to help the women and children in the mosque to safety. She then returned to Dr. Ahmed to help him leave the mosque when she was gunned down. Through the darkness, at a national memorial service on March 29th in Christchurch, Dr. Ahmed said he forgave the shooter. Please welcome to the stage for his remarks, Dr. Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Just to remove a confusion, I am a homeopathic health consultant, so I'm not a modern doctor. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you, all of you. And it is an honor and privilege to be here to share our story. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the kind, the merciful. Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. I have created you from a single pair of male and female, Adam and Eve. So you are all children of Adam and Eve. You are one large human family. You are brothers and sisters. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ. And then I have made you into nations, into tribes, into different races, into different countries, for a best purpose. And that purpose is لِتَعَارَفُوا. So you can know about one another. You can learn about one another. You can complement one another, not hate one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. And the one among you, the best and honorable in the sight of Allah, the one who practices righteousness, who practices kindness, love, and unselfishness, not the opposite. Al-Quran, chapter 49, verse 13. As a Muslim, based on this verse, I would like to greet you again as my human brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. When I received the invitation to come here, you can see me, 28 hours of journey. I thought it was not possible. So my body said, wheelchair man, don't dare. But my heart said, something is, I was feeling in my heart. I was feeling that your love was attracting me like a powerful magnet. So in my heart, emotionally, I could not resist. So I asked my daughter what to do, and she said to me, she's 15 years old, she said, Dad, you got to go. So that's why I'm here. I didn't come empty-handed, even though nothing in here, but I didn't come empty-handed. I have come from New Zealand all the way with gifts for all of you. That gift is the love for all of you from New Zealanders. I have come with gift from the city, the people of the city called Garden City, the city of love, compassion, and spirituality, the city of Christchurch. From my people, I have brought love as a gift for you. You, especially the people in the United States, and also people in this world. So please accept our gift. Love is very natural. Love unites us. And love has no boundaries. When there is a bombing in Sri Lanka, we feel it because of the love. When there is something happening in Christchurch, we feel it because of the love. Even though we live so far away. Why? Why do we feel? Because we have a connection. We have a simple root, and that root is that we are all the children of Adam and Eve. We are one. We are one large family. That's why we feel love, and love attracts us and pulls us together. On the other hand, the hate destroys us. The one who has hate is like a volcano, a heart like a volcano. It is filled with hatred, rage and fury, and it is burning within, and also it is trying to burn the outside. The hate costs us. It destroys our unity. It destroys our trust, and it cost us huge. 15th of March, 2019, hate costed 51 lives. They were peaceful Muslim worshippers in the mosque. They did not commit any crime. That hate has caused so many people traumatized. The entire peaceful New Zealand was traumatized. The hate has left so many children motherless or fatherless. And this is not good. The hate has costed my wife also. I lost my wife. We went to mosque together, and the last conversation we were having, that we would finish our prayer, would come to the car, and then we'll go and pick up our daughter. It never happened. She could not come home. I had to go home alone. Then I had to tell my daughter, that her mother would never come back home again. But we had to respond. We had to respond as a nation, as a community, as an individual. So the first response came from our leader, our Honorable Prime Minister. May Allah bless her. She came boldly and she said to the nation that we are one, we are inclusive, we are not divisive. We will face the challenge together. We will share the grief as one body. And the entire nation, they came together. They did not care who was a Muslim, who was a non-Muslim, who was a faithful, who was not a faithful. They came together because they wanted to care. They wanted to take care of their fellow human. They considered one another as one human family. Muslim community in New Zealand, they came together and they had decided that they should take the path of patience, peace, and tolerance. I had to respond as an individual because I believe each one of us has some duty towards others. So I had to respond, and my response was that I offered my love and forgiveness for the killer. Why did I do this? I receive this question frequently, that why did you do this? So I will briefly try to share my answer. There are so many answers. I can write a book on this. But I have got only 10 minutes. The first reason is that I love him because he is my human brother. Because Quran has taught me that each and every human being is my brothers and sisters. Even though I do not know you, I was there, I looked back, that did I know anyone? I did not. But when I look at your face, each face is like a beautiful flower to me. I'm from Garden City, Christchurch, so I'll talk about garden. In the garden, when you look at the flowers, different types, different color, yet they are not fighting. They stay together side by side, hundreds and hundreds of years with peaceful coexistence. You may have one faith, I may have different faith, but you are a beautiful flower. I'm a beautiful flower. She is a beautiful flower. And together, the humanity, we make one beautiful garden. So I forgive him because I love him as a human being. He is my human brother. This is the first reason. The second reason is that Quran has taught me that if you forgive somebody, then the God will love you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. والكاظمين الغيظ والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. In Quran, Allah says, those who control their anger and forgive their fellow men, they are the good doers. And Allah loves those who are good doers. So I wanted to be a good doer. This is my second reason. Third reason is Quran has taught me that if anyone does bad stuff to you, in return do good. idfa' billati hiya ahsan. If anyone does evil to you, do the opposite. So he gave me hatred, and I gave him love. That's why I did it. One more point. Quran taught me that Allah sent a messenger not to spread hatred, not to spread violence, but to be a mercy for the worlds. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. O Messenger, I have sent you as a mercy for the worlds. So I follow him. I wanted to show some mercy because in his teaching he said, Irhamu man fil ardi yarhamukum man fis sama. You be kind on your fellow human, then the Lord in the heaven will be kind on you. The point I was trying to make, my dear human brothers and sisters, together from leader, from top to the layman, ordinary man like me. In New Zealand, we came together like solid brick wall. كَأَنَّهُمْ بُنْيَانٌ مَرْصُوصٌ. We came like this. And then we could not stop one hate. But what we could do, together for one hate, we produced millions and millions and millions of love. So what can we do about it? How can we stop hatred? Is there any medicine in the pharmacy we can go and buy and spray and then hatred will be gone? Is there any other way the angel can come, any divine way, they will remove it? Or the politicians, they can do some legislation and then hatred will be gone? It is not possible. To remove hatred, it is a responsibility of you, me, and everybody. It's a responsibility of government. a responsibility of religious leaders, religious people, and each and every ordinary person. Because each one of us have hatred or have love. We have heart. And we are in control of our own heart. If each one of us, we decide that we want our heart to be peaceful, we want our heart to be loving, we want our heart to be generous, then together we can change. Mom and dad, brothers and sisters, businessmen, every person, we are responsible. We cannot just say that politicians, you come with some magic wand and you remove the hatred. That's not going to happen. We have to do it. We have to help the politicians. Because if majority people want this way, then the politicians for our board, they have to follow us. So we have to want peace. We have to want unity. So we need to unite in one common ground. And that common ground is we are one human family. If we can fix that attitude, that we are one human family, we are brothers and sisters, then the rest of the thing comes automatically. As a brother and sister, we have to treat one another with love, care, respect, and fairness. All the human rights things comes always, but before it comes, we have to fix our attitude. We have to fix our heart. And I believe that all the beautiful flowers as you are, the important people, the representatives from all over the world, you will take the message and we will together will promote the idea that we want united mankind. We have united state, but we need united mankind. We need to promote that idea, and then we should educate ourselves. We should educate others that it is our responsibility that we should think we are one, and it is our responsibility that we should look after one another. May God bless us. May God bless all of you. May God bless the humanity. May God bless the people in the United States of America. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for coming. That's a long distance.
Thank you. You are most welcome. Thank you for having us.
Hey, stranger. Yamini Ravindran, who is the Legal and Advocacy Coordinator for the National Christian Evangelical Alliance of Sri Lanka. Ms. Ravindran provided the State Department with information on the extent of the attack, the status of victims and their families, and needs of the survivors after the horrific bombings in Sri Lanka. Her NGO was vocal about not stigmatizing Sri Lanka's Muslim community and condemned incidences of violence and discrimination against Muslims in the aftermath of the attacks. We now ask for her presentation.
I'm here to briefly explain to you about the attack that occurred in Sri Lanka in April, the impact that it had on the community, the recovery, and to end with recommendations. And I only have 10 minutes. So I'll keep it brief. Easter Sunday is supposed to be a day of celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Most Sunday services would celebrate it with a special service. So this Easter Sunday, Christians in Sri Lanka went to church dressed in their finest clothing. But little did we know that this Easter was going to be different. It was going to permanently change the lives of many. On April 21st, a series of explosions targeting 3 churches and 3 5-star hotels rocked Sri Lanka. It left us with a total death toll over 250, with around 500 injured. Sadly, a large number of children were among the dead. May 2019 marked a decade since the end of Sri Lanka's 30-year-long civil war, which claimed the lives of thousands of people. So as a nation, we were just getting used to life. Life without violence, without bloodshed. The young children who were the victims of the Easter Sunday attack could be called the first generation. The first generation where they did not experience war, division, or brutality. In Batiklo, Zion Church, 14 of 32 were children. They were standing just outside the church premises right after their Sunday school, having their morning snacks, when the bomb went off. And on that fatal day, when the Sunday school teacher questioned them, "How many of you are willing to die for Jesus?" almost all of them raised their hands. It's tragic. Only a few minutes later, that this became a reality for many of them. In Negombo, over 100 were killed. And some homes will never be open because families have passed away. And in other places like the St. Anthony's Kochikade Church, some children have lost their parents, and some parents have lost all their children. So as a nation, the experience of Easter Sunday, it brought back hurtful memories of the past, the loss of lives, devastation of families, curfews, and widespread fear among the people. The impact it has had on our community, in particularly the Christian community, it has left us with a fear psychosis like never before. Weeks after the attack, Roman Catholic and Christian churches were closed. Schools were closed. Today we need to go to church with armed guards and security checking. Children go to school with security checking. There is an increase of army, military officials guarding, checking for explosives. But dealing with the trauma of the victims is the biggest challenge. Because some of their lives have changed permanently. Some will never be able to walk, have eyesight, or do anything on their own. Some have been paralyzed permanently. Emergency regulations, which were only lifted recently in Sri Lanka after 30 years of civil war, has been implemented all over again. This has consequently left room for churches to be questioned in the guise of providing protection. It has the potential of affecting the churches in Sri Lanka. It has empowered some of the extremist elements who have become stronger, confident in some of their claims. I would like to share 2 stories of victims. One little girl is only 6. She has suffered very serious internal and external injuries. She's been through several surgeries, and in one brain surgery that she went through, one of her eyes had to be removed. The other eye, she lost sight when the bomb took place. She is home now. She has been discharged. She lost both her parents. She still doesn't know that she lost both her parents. So her grandmother is looking after her. She keeps questioning. She still doesn't know that she may never be able to see again. She keeps questioning. She keeps asking, why is it so dark? The second story is of a 13-year-old boy. He went to church that day dressed in his red shirt best one. And he went to Sunday school, he came out, he met his mother, and he told her, I'll just have a glass of water and I'll come back. And then the bomb went off. Someone told the mother, we saw your son. So she kept thinking, my son is alive, nothing has happened to him. After some time, even as she was there and everyone was frantically running, some people, they were talking, people were saying, you know, in this particular fire, children are being burnt. And in her heart, she thought, my son is okay. Someone saw him, right? But after some time, she couldn't find him. And she realized, and she found out later on, that her son was burned to death. And today she's questioning. And she says, if only I knew. If only I knew my son was in that fire. I was just standing there, I would have run into that fire and I would have saved him. So how do we answer such questions? How do we console such people? A 22-year-old girl succumbed to her injuries just last week and she passed away. But I must say, with the Easter attacks, we have also suffered as a nation. There has been increase in the mistrust between communities, hate speech, disinformation, very particularly on social media channels, targeting the Muslim community as well. 3 weeks after the Easter Sunday bombings, there was also a backlash against the Muslim community. So how is the community recovering? How are the victims recovering? With regard to recovery process, for Sri Lanka, this is not the first time we have experienced a disaster of such a magnitude. We have been through 30 years of war, tsunami, and insurgencies. Shared by these experiences, the people of Sri Lanka are deeply resilient and compassionate. It's encouraging to see how some have even quit their jobs to look after the injured. There's one young girl in hospital, severely burnt. She was supposed to be married this year. Her fiancé is by her side and he says, for me, love is not only her physical appearance. The Christian community has reached out to the Muslim community to prevent backlashes. A mother I spoke to from the Batiklo Zion Church told me her little 7-year-old son who died was indeed a special gift from God, and she always knew this. Tears in her eyes, she tells me that even though I'm heartbroken by his death, I know because of my faith, one day I am going to see my son. And because of that faith, I'm going to ensure that I live a good life, a righteous life, so that I will see him. And she says, I won't let this discourage me or question my faith in God. The Christian community has resumed having its services and masses. Schools have gradually begun. Even though normalcy is getting back, we are getting back to normalcy, there is still an element of threat. And now we have a new challenge as a Christian community to face amidst other persecution trends and challenges as well. The victims of this horrific incident are broken, they're suffering, they are in great pain. However, they are on the path to recovery. I can assure you of that. Because they have no hate in their hearts. They have forgiven those responsible for these attacks. I quote Nelson Mandela, "Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace. And that is what we see in Sri Lanka, and that is what we see within the Christian community, the victims in Sri Lanka. I'll end with recommendations. How can faith leaders work together? To encourage communities to show compassion and acknowledge their susceptibility to general biases. Faith leaders must work together to counter voices of hate and calls to incite violence from within their own religious communities. They can be more preventive than responsive in their approach and disseminate positive and affirmative speech to counter hate. How can governments work together? Governments should work together in holding each other accountable with regard to its efforts to promote freedom of religion or belief, safeguard the rights of religious communities to freely practice their faith, while actively supporting efforts to build capacity of state and non-state actors, to advance freedom of religion or belief, and to combat extremism in religious hostile contexts. And secondly, governments should work together to not only respond when religious liberty violations take place, but also to effectively prevent religious violence and religious liberty violations from taking place. To equip each other, to come up with mechanisms, such as maybe, as an example, the early warning or early response systems, and to ensure a community, a society, where we do enjoy freedom of religion or belief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of our kickoff presenters here. They all have gone through a traumatic set of experiences that none of us want to experience at all, and yet it's way too common around the world. I remember talking with a priest in northern Iraq after his parish had been overrun by ISIS, and I was talking with him about the aftermath of that, and he said the most difficult thing was really pushing people and trying to teach people to and help people to forgive. And here you heard from testimony from all three here of people that have forgiven in remarkable, horrific circumstances. Thank you all again for making the sacrifice and the great travels to be here with us today. Thank you. A small cadre of government officials leads the official efforts for religious freedom globally. All occupy positions created each within the last 20 years as the world began to take seriously oppression of religious adherents. Mostly unsung, they are essential advocates for moving the world towards a more peaceful, prosperous, and open place. And they're all my colleagues. I'm calling them up to the stage now. Jan Figel is the EU Special Envoy for the promotion of freedom of religion or belief outside of Europe. He works outside of the EU. He's the first to serve in this position. Jan is a former European Commissioner for Education and former First Deputy Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic. He's done a great job, and we certainly hope the new Commission will extend your position and provide you even more support. Jan, welcome. Ambassador Odd Merit Wig, please come on forward, is a special representative at Norway's Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Freedom of Religion. She's the second to serve in this role. Her previous posts included serving as the Norwegian ambassador to Pakistan and as Deputy Undersecretary of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Norway has been a great partner in this cause, contributing to the International Religious Freedom Fund and providing critical resources to support the International Panel of Parliamentarians for Freedom of Religion or Belief. That's a group you're going to hear from later on. Part of our week's activities is really going to be just about explaining to you the apparatuses that exist and that are in place and that hopefully you can access. And she's been an excellent, and Norway's been an excellent ally. Good to have you here on board. Lastly is Ahmed Shahid, appointed as an independent expert for the UN Human Rights Council as the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. He previously served as the first UN Special Rapporteur of the Human Rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran and twice served as the Foreign Minister of the Maldives. Ahmed has been a great partner working entrepreneurially. That may seem like a strange word to say about a UN official, but working entrepreneurially to find opportunities to advance these issues, and he certainly has done that, and he also has been a great partner. There are other special representatives that we could have invited, but we couldn't get them all on stage. One is involved with our neighbor to the north, the Canadians. They have had either an ambassador or special diplomats focused on these issues. We appreciate that Canada launched 4 years ago the International Contact Group on Freedom of Religion or Belief. It's the first such network of its kind to provide a platform for increased diplomatic activity in this space. We and the Canadians now serve as co-chairs of that group. And we've been working on new steps for that group to announce in the coming days to further deepen the alliance of values that has coalesced around the fundamental right of religious freedom. So we look forward to hearing comments. We'll hear from each of these in the order that I presented for a period of about 5 minutes, and then we're going to go to a question and answer session for them. So with that, Jan, you want to kick us off from your seat there?
Thank you. Thank you, Sam, not only for introduction, but for your committed work and cooperation. I'm glad that we can work together, and I hope that we can achieve much more after such gatherings like last year and especially now, this time in Washington together. On my contribution, I would focus on 3 points. How it came into being, that the European Union has a special envoy, first ever. Then what are my modalities of work or how I operate, and then some lessons I learned or messages to share together here for tomorrow. So the reason I'm here, or nomination of the first ever EU Special Envoy, is a fruit of martyrdom. It's not the result of lobbying or kind of politics behind. Although I did a lot personally to persuade EU leaders that we have to do something after 2014 when Daesh, ISIS started really mass atrocities in Iraq and Syria. I wrote many letters, this is not so important, but then in 2016, February, European Parliament adopted very, very strong, clear, unequivocal resolution denouncing not only mass atrocities, but also asking, demanding to do something. The same happened here in March in Congress, US Congress, and then British Parliament, and so on. So according to this resolution, President of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, decided then in May to nominate first ever EU Special Envoy for freedom of religion or belief, and invited me, which was kind of a boomerang coming back to the person who tried to persuade the others to do something. So I started, and I'm in this position since 3 years, until October this year. Then future commission will decide what comes next, and future starts now, because today there is a vote in the European Parliament on the designated president of the Commission, or Ursula von der Leyen. So we shall see. But I hope that Europe will care, will continue, not because of me, but because this is important, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide. I was attached to the development agenda, which is very open and broad, international. I was working with Commissioner Mimica. There was also a group in the Parliament, first time ever since 2014, called Intergroup on freedom of religion or belief and religious tolerance. We got guidelines of 28 countries as a consensual diplomatic instrument to promote freedom of religion or belief, which was also a good contribution. So the momentum is here, at least from European point of view, and we need to institutionalize these policies to show we are working on this permanently, efficiently, and with like-minded partners, countries worldwide. Secondly, how I operated. I focused, of course, first of all on Middle East, but also on South Asia, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, so priority regions, and then on country levels, because each country is different. I visited many of them: Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Senegal, Burkina, Morocco, Pakistan, Malaysia, India, Vietnam, just to name a few, but also in Europe, Bosnia, Northern Macedonia, Russia. We try to adapt relations policies to each situations, which means to use our projects, programs, bilateral and multilateral instruments, and to promote FORB as an important part of human rights dialogue, human rights policy. Secondly, I was quite active, and I'm glad that Ahmed Shahid is here with international fora, especially United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, but also New York, G20 Interface Forum. We have established European Academy of Religion in Bologna in 2016, which is a contribution to know more, to combine science and religious realities, to learn, to be literate in the current 21st century. And then third dimension was and is dialogue, cooperation with faith-based organizations and civil society. This is very crucially important. Different instruments I already mentioned, including financial. We have good treaties or leverages. We have also projects under European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights. There may be, I think, more than 50 already projects dealing with FORB, financed by the European Union. Advocacy for individual cases, some of them were really bloody cases or issues of life and death, lifelong imprisonment or death penalty, some of them successful. It speaks that it is important to be engaged also on, and especially on, individual issues, not only broader reforms and adaptations of conditions, but individuals, those who suffer persecution. Messages or lessons which I think are important. For freedom of religion or belief is not more, is not about, but it's in the center. It's litmus test of all human rights. If freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom to believe or not to believe is respected, then we can see freedoms of expression to be respected, freedom of assembly, association. So this is litmus test of all human rights. This is expansive human right. And therefore, we need to invest more into this area. That's why we try to do something in the European Union. Secondly, it's very important for those who believe and those who do not believe. For all, it's about good governance. I lived half of my life in communist Czechoslovakia, and I can tell you stories about persecution. So good governance, freedom of religion or belief is about good governance for all. And then, of course, economy and society prospering or developing. It's a question of life and death. Reports of your US Commission or ACN or many other reports speaks about life and death of millions or hundreds of billions of people, depending on the situation around FORB. We speak a lot in the world now about climate change, importance of climate change. I spoke yesterday in the National Press Club about importance of FORB climate change, religious freedom climate change, because the situation is very negative, very negative. Majority of the world does not enjoy religious freedom, and tendency is negative. So either we stop it and revert, and this is FORB climate change, or we will see century of genocides going on. Simply business as usual. Century of genocides behind, and century of genocides maybe again repeated. So we need century of hope, and this is about FORB climate change. The second message I learned is about freedom, working, living, existing only only, always with responsibility. Two sides of one coin. And we cannot just speak about freedom without responsibility. It is important to nurture a mentality or ethics of responsibility. Religious leaders, faith-based organizations need and should contribute to the social responsibility. Religious social responsibility resembles a bit corporate social responsibility. Let's work on this, because this then makes freedom sustainable, fruitful. The third point was and is, I learned in some countries, for example now Egypt tries to speak about communities, mosaic, one family, not majority and minorities, but a mosaic of social components. Instead of quantitative measuring, quantitative approach, we should speak about qualitative. Everybody belongs to society, to the state, to the system. So therefore, let's adapt also language. Language is important for understanding of freedom of religion or belief for all. The fourth point, and the last, I think the most sensitive, most important in time of identity politics. Identity is important. It's not something negative. My son is different from me. We are all different. Nobody is identical to anybody, and it speaks about billions of people today, billions in the history, billions in future. We are all different. That's principle. That's not the problem. That's definition. But we are all equal in dignity. Nobody is more, whether he comes or she comes from royal family or from a homeless family. And that's the great principle, that we are all equal in dignity and we are all different in identity. And steps from identity politics leads to the responsibility ethics, which means I think we need to learn how to live together in this diversity, because diversity, as I say, is not the problem, but reality and definition, principle. And therefore, culture of human dignity is needed, because human dignity is the base of all human rights. In dignity, we are all equal. And political response, and that's the message I want to share with you, political message, lesson from equal dignity is equal citizenship. Equal citizenship. In Iraq, in post-war or post-conflict countries, everywhere, equal citizenship means rights, duties, protection, access, participation. We are all right holders and duty bearers. And I think that if our foreign policies brings these messages into forefront, into practical realities, into constitutional clauses or legislation, I think we will see different, better, more humane 21st century. That's my not only learning, but also contribution and conviction. European Union is based on unity in diversity. We speak a lot about our issues and problems. We learned, we adapted from the atrocities and divisions of the past to live together in diversity. It is possible, it is important, it's enriching, and we can share, and we want to share with you all these lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Odd, please.
Thank you. First of all,
I'm sorry, we're going to Odd next, and then Med. We'll wrap up with you.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Brownback. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. And let me also start by thanking, through you, thanking your staff for the magnificent work they do in taking a leadership role in this area. I was appointed Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief in 2017. And I work, as you said, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway. I'm a public servant and a career diplomat. And so my predecessors have also come from the Foreign Service. We established this position back in 2006-07 in the aftermath of the so-called cartoons where violence, extreme violence, in fact, followed in several countries. And I think we all, through that, became aware of the literally explosive political impact and mobilizing force that religion can have, in a negative sense in this case. This was so different to the situation in a country like Norway, which is largely secular in its approach. So with this as a starting point, of course political in the sense, it was still placed and located in our Department of Human Rights to ensure, I believe, that we need to start with the basics to analyze such a situation. This is a human rights issue. Freedom of religion or belief has to do with tolerance, with freedom of expression, with respect for the freedom of others. Now, the position has evolved over the years, and changing governments have maintained the position and even strengthened it in the past. So what is it that I do? And I think I'd like to divide my short presentation in bullet points, so to speak, just as Jan just did. Where is it that I work, and what are the issues that I raise? Let me first say that I feel a strong responsibility for the domestic scene. We have to ensure that our diplomats, representatives of our foreign service, representatives of Norway, are informed and are aware of these issues and can handle them with respect and insights in the countries where they work, countries which are very different from our own countries. So we have guidelines for the diplomatic service, and we do training. So that is one part of, or one area where I work. Secondly, a small country like Norway, and we're not represented in more than a fraction of the world's countries. A small country like us has to work through partners and with partners. The United Nations is an extremely important partner for us. We work with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is located in Geneva. We provide support, and we discuss with them where are the relevant countries, where are the relevant areas to work, what is the best approach. Through the United Nations, we also participate in the Universal Periodic Review, which you may be familiar with, where individual countries are examined at regular basis, and we try, and I must say try because we're not always successful, but we try and include issues of freedom of religion or belief in that examination. We also work, obviously, with international organizations. We work with the US. We work, Jan mentioned support for individuals. And I am very pleased that we have an agreement with Freedom House to support individuals and smaller groups which are persecuted. This is an important part of our activities. But of course, it's small in the sense that it deals with individuals and not large groups. We work with other international organizations, and we work with Norwegian civil society. I'm happy that some of them are present here today. You mentioned Ambassador Brownback, IPP Forb. This is not a Norwegian initiative, it's an international initiative for parliamentarians who are extremely important in their individual countries in raising these issues, in creating legislation, and in following up. The organization is based in Norway and supported by us. The Organization for Security, and cooperation in Europe, OSCE, is also an important partner for us. What is it that we raise? Just briefly in terms of bullet points. Now, FORB, freedom of religion or belief, is one of the rights, one of the important articles, as you know, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But all human rights are interrelated and interdependent. And I see it as part of my mandate to raise the discussion on how we ensure that we have an informed debate on freedom of religion or belief and freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief and gender issues and women's rights, on LGBTI rights, cultural rights, and other areas where we know that often more traditional interpretations of religion may clash with developments in society and with hard-won rights in these areas. In this field, I believe, and I know that you're aware of that, Ahmed, the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion is a great help in raising such issues in your reports. I meet regularly with representatives of faith groups, of organizations that work with these issues, and we have often tough discussions on this, but I believe that we are able to move these discussions forward and to increase the respect between various groups which have different views on such important issues. Another issue that I often raise is that, yes, religion is an important factor in many of the conflicts we see in the world, but it is very often not the only reason. We need an informed debate when we tackle issues of conflict in foreign countries, and we need to analyze carefully the context in which they take place. So, to sum up, I try and be active in many areas, and I try and encourage greater understanding and greater analysis of the challenges that we meet when we advocate FORB in various areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Ahmed.
Thank you, Ambassador Brownback, for having me on and for leadership in this field as well. It's good to be back here in Washington for the second annual ministerial meeting. I work for the UN, but I am not of the UN. My day job is at the University of Essex. I am among some 50 experts hired by the UN, engaged by the UN, without pay, of course, to work for them on specific themes that we work on. So the theme I am working on for the UN now is freedom of religion or belief. I am the 5th mandate holder. The mandate goes back to 1986. So people ahead of me had done a lot of groundwork on clarifying the thematic content of this right. But still, we find that normative confusion, lack of normative clarity is one of the biggest challenges we face in advancing this right. What precisely does this right entail? What is the scope of this right? In many countries where I've been, I come across claims that, well, my religious beliefs dictate me to do this, therefore I should have the right to do so, even if that might come at the expense of someone else's rights. That is clearly not covered under this right. So clarifying the normative concept is an important priority for my mandate, along with my colleagues here who work from different perspectives on this. So one of the key themes I focus on is doing that. I do this through 2 annual reports that I produce to the UN, one to the Council in Geneva and one to the General Assembly in New York. I have done reports on the links between freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief, often seen as clashing rights, but clarifying the normative interlinks between these 2 rights. I have looked at the nature of state-religion relationships, what is the best form of that relationship, Is it secularism, or is it some other form of link with religion and the state? I've looked at countering violent extremism and how that impacts upon the right to exercise freedom of religion or belief. I'm also currently working on, for my next report to the GA in this September, on anti-Semitism and how that impacts upon rights of Jewish communities around the world to exercise their right to freedom of religion or belief, and also how that impacts upon general societal challenges on hate speech. My future reports will look at links between gender and freedom of religion or belief, and also I'm working on assessing how far we have come since the past 40 years on implementing the 1981 UN Declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and of discrimination based on religion. The mandate I hold is primarily tasked to monitor how states implement this. So my key mandate from the Council is to promote respect for freedom of religion or belief around the world, identify emerging obstacles and existing obstacles to the enjoyment of that right, to monitor how states implement or violate the declaration, and to make sure I keep a gender perspective in how I monitor this right. The tools I have at my disposal are writing letters of allegation to various governments who I find in violation of this right. I find that the bulk of my communications are about violations of freedom of religion or belief in tandem with violations of freedom of expression. So blasphemy laws or other laws that restrict religious expression is one of the common challenges I encounter in this field and what I write most about. The tools primarily focus on getting redress to individuals. So advocacy for individual redress is something very important in the work I do. I also, like I said, look at structural issues, thematic issues. So when I visit countries, I examine the whole legal framework and the policies and practice in that country and offer recommendations on how they may address this. I have been to Albania, to Uzbekistan, to Tunisia, and the Netherlands. I shall be in Sri Lanka shortly, and then next year in Malaysia and hopefully Tajikistan. All these are by invitation. I cannot go to a country without state consent. So the biggest challenge for me in this sense is lack of state cooperation. When states do not cooperate with the UN mandate, there's not much really we can do, apart from perhaps some naming and shaming. Sometimes that works, but often that is not the best thing to do. What is best to do is to work with governments and civil society and to make them work together to ensure that that right is respected for everybody in that context. I work with several countries which emphasize in their foreign policies promoting FOB around the world. So Norway, the EU, the US, Canada, Denmark are among my common, if you like, like-minded countries working on this theme. As a sole person with another job to do, I find the support I get from these colleagues very, very, very important. What works best is when I can put together a coalition of actors, whether it's civil society actors or governments working together towards a common interest of everybody. So I believe the importance of what is called orchestration, getting a lot of actors to work together. I believe it's important in this work that I foster what are called cross-faith or cross-boundary coalitions. Rather than simply working with one religious group, it's best to have coalitions of different faith groups working together. So one of the things that have been involved in the UN context is developing something called Faith for Rights Initiative. This was an attempt by the UN to bring together actors from different faiths and none, and also scholars and philosophers, I suppose, into one room, asking them how would, from your different points of view, starting points, advance towards the Universal Human Rights Declaration? How would you promote that from your different faith commitments, or if you have no faith, from humanist perspectives as well? So the idea is that all of us, whether we have faith or none, can still be able to work together to achieve the goal of respecting everybody's right to freedom of religion or belief. There are 4 literacies I promote in my work. One I call religious literacy. I find time and time again that misunderstanding, prejudice, bias, stereotyping is often based upon lack of knowledge of what the other is about. So promoting understanding of other faiths is an important task that I emphasize. It's also important for diplomats when they work in different contexts to know what the different country contexts are about and how they can advance this. The other is normative literacy on freedom of religion or belief. Like I said earlier, There's a lot of contestation about the scope of this right, often about the limitations clause. Many states argue that, of course, we can limit right to freedom of belief on account of public safety, public order, health, and morals, and others, not realizing that even in that context, that must be the exception, not the rule, and must still follow certain proportionality criteria. So promoting literacy on the human rights framework is important. The third, in this day of globalization, I think media literacy is important, both for journalists and also for others, to know where to get your stories, to know which stories are more reliable. I say in the UK, to know your Onion from the Guardian is important. So to have, to know the authenticity of the stories you're relaying. Also, for journalists to know that when they report, they don't simply bring loudest voices on religion, but they respect the diversity of voices there, and they also bring them out to the fore. The final literacy is digital literacy. In this day of social media and so on, it's vital to know how digital media works, digital systems work. Artificial intelligence can create, algorithms can create filter bubbles through which we only learn what we are already reading about. So silos of filter bubbles can really undermine understanding. So these four literacies are very, very important. Finally, my last comment, if I may, is I stress the importance of using existing tools developed to advance this framework. So within the UN context, there's something called the Rabat Plan of Action on guiding states on how to address incitement to hate, which argues that rather than criminalize all hate speech, criminalize those that actually incite imminent violence. At the other levels, have other measures, including countering with positive speech. If somebody is engaging in bad speech to exclude some community, engage in counter speech that actually expresses solidarity with the community and negates that speech. The other is something called 1618 resolution. It's a very long title. It's about combating stigmatization, incitement to violence, and negative stereotyping of persons based on religion or belief. And attached to this is something called the Istanbul process. Now, the US was instrumental in initially proclaiming this resolution and also in pushing this forward. The Istanbul process has an action plan which essentially brings together all that we need to do to ensure that we foster and promote societies which can respect right for freedom of religion or belief. So my appeal to everybody is to work to mobilize these synergies amongst governments, amongst society, amongst faith-based actors to harness these tools we have. Finally, so I said before, but my last point is, in this day and age of pushback on human rights generally, we need to find creative ways to push back against that pushback. Mm-hmm. So one way of doing that would be to ensure we contextualize human rights in all contexts. We make people understand that it's not something Geneva or somebody else is imposing on you. It's something we've all been trying to do. We've all been trying to find the good life all throughout history. So relate this without undermining the international human rights framework to different contexts. And finally, exploring the benefits that come from respecting FOB. You cannot have human rights in a country that does not respect the liberty of conscience. So ensuring that we look at the benefits we can have from respecting FOB for other areas. One area is the SDGs, the Development Goals UN has set. The tagline here is leaving no one behind. If we did not respect freedom of religion or belief for everybody, we would not succeed in not leaving anyone behind. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Ahmed. Good. Some excellent points made here. What we're going to do is have some questions and comments that we'll have engaged here. I'd ask my fellow participants here if you can keep your answers brief, and that way we'll get to as many of these questions as we possibly can. Before we go to those, there is another, what we're trying to do is introduce you to various assets that exist around. You've got three here on the stage. You've got one from the EU, one from the UN, one from Norway. Other countries have these as well. We're trying to introduce you to assets connect with. Another one that's here in the United States is the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and a number of the commissioners are here. And I was wondering if they would please stand so we could recognize the commission that's here. They do a great job. Thank you, guys. Before long, we'll break for a long lunch break, and the intentionality of that, to have it long, is that so people will build these relationships and make these connections. So I'm trying to introduce as many people as possible, and I hope that can take place. My fellow participants here on this panel, just briefly, because we've got here today civil society, religious leaders, what really advice do you have for them on how civil society can best help you in your work, in what you're doing? I relate with them. We work all the time on a religious freedom roundtable here where we connect. Jan, what's the best way that you're recommending that this group that's assembled here can work with you in the EU? Yeah, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I will follow your example and say that there are several other special either envoys or ambassadors or representatives. For example, I see German colleague Markus Grübel.
Oh, good.
From last year, Michael Suhr from Denmark, he was around.
Your German colleague, would you please stand so people can see you as well, that's in this position as well. Good.
Michael Suhr from Denmark.
Very good.
Okay. Lord Ahmed is coming from United Kingdom, and there is a new system and protection for religious freedom in Hungary. In Lithuania, we expect some news, I hope, from Netherlands. So this is a momentum now, at least from the European Union perspective, and we need to work together. And my answer to your question with civil society and faith organizations, I recommend and I would love to share 3 points: hardworking, teamworking, and networking. Because if we want to achieve something, we need to work hard with knowledge, with memory, with openness, open-minded, open-hearted approach, but also in teams. It's synergy. It's about not mathematics, but really shared vision, shared ground or common ground, common interest. And then we can have a common future and common good, bonum commune. And then, of course, networking globally. The world is not so big. It's relatively small. And if we gather together and go on working together, I think it's a power. History is made by creative minorities. Majority will join, will add. We had in our country, in Czechoslovakia and Slovakia, velvet revolution, because majority wanted to get rid of the past, which was totalitarian. But it started with fight or actions of groups, of minorities. So that's why I say active minority can change a lot if it is active, if it is open, teamworking and networking. So again, hardworking, teamworking, networking.
Very good. Ahmed, how about your comments on what civil society can do to work and reach you at the UN? Maybe you want to post your cell phone number here.
Well, I think the most important thing that can be done is to ensure that, well, the power they have to extend solidarity to those who are victimized in their own contexts, to stand up for their members in the community, and then, of course, communicate to us or elsewhere what's happening to them. So documenting what's happening in the country, and then also express solidarity with those who are victimized, and then networking, like Ian said, around the world. In my current report on anti-Semitism, I've had 13 city consultations. All these were consultations with Jewish communities in that country. They were able to provide me great insights I would not have picked up otherwise. So being able to communicate, interact with the mandate is super good in terms of being able to have the information necessary to make those reports public at the UN. So engagement is a crucial part of that.
How do they engage you at the UN? I always imagine the UN is hard to reach. I mean, just, okay, do I dial up the UN?
Right. It is a difficult thing. There's, of course, an address which says SR-FOB, but then that's a very difficult one. I encourage people to reach out to that, but I also try to make myself visible by having my own other entry points of contact.
So if some of these people here wanted to have you come out to different meetings that they were hosting, that's a possibility?
Yes, they could. I mean, I have both a UN mail and also a private unit set up here in the US, in New York, at the Ralph Bunche Institute, which is active, again, reaching out to the society. So either of these contact points would be good to reach out to me and to join these activities. Or my own address at Essex University, email address will work. So reach out to me, and I'm very keen to engage all of you in the work that I do.
Odd, how about you in Norway? I'm sure you're out and accessible to the Norwegian people, but you've got a global reach and focus. So how do you work, and would you work with this civil society gathered here?
Well, the advantage of civil society is, of course, that they have a different access than we as government have. Not only at the grassroots level, but they have an access to activists and to organizations that work at the local level in the various countries, which is different from the one that we as government representatives have. So the dialogue that we have is extremely important, and the information that civil society can bring to the government level that we can then act on at a more official level is extremely important, and I encourage that all the time. We also encourage civil society to participate in our, well, I wouldn't call it round table, but at least in our consultative groups. And we invite quite broadly to share information. And then, of course, civil society has the unique role of being a pressure group to act on politicians and to share more publicly their concerns.
Good. I want to recognize Greg Mitchell is here. Greg, you want to stand up? Greg hosts the weekly Religious Freedom Roundtable here in Washington. And the reason I'm pointing him out is every Tuesday that I'm in town from 11 to noon, we have a roundtable, and then he runs the agenda. He's civil society. And if people are here and they want to raise the religious freedom issue, they come in and they get on the schedule and they get on the agenda. And so we try to have some informality. We'd love to see, as I mentioned here, 100 of those started around the world. So you've got the interaction of government and civil society, religious leaders on these topics, because they come up frequently and quickly, and they need to be addressed directly. So we're trying to get those spun up in a lot of different places, and Greg does a great job, and a lot of people here. And you're welcome to come if you're here. Jan, I want to build off of you made a pretty provocative and concerning question. As a relatively new grandfather, you were talking about the trend lines don't look good in this space. And you were even talking about a century of genocide if we don't get the trends changed. That's pretty dire. Yeah,
it is. It is. You know, you mentioned in your introductory speech Holocaust Memorial and never again. And never again means never again. But the reality is again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I was nominated to the position, I'm sitting here, because there was a genocide in the Middle East. So either we mean what we say, what we subscribe to, or then it's, you know, another meeting, another time lost. And it's not so much about momentum or meetings, but people suffer, real persons. They die because we abandon, we forget, we neglect, we don't care. Three enemies of evil are very visible in our societies, whether we speak about my country or maybe this country, you know it better. It's indifference, ignorance, and fear. And where these phenomena are present, evil has a lot of, success, impact. So we need to work against these allies of evil and, of course, against the crime of crimes, genocide. There is convention from 1948. There is UDHR from 1948. Do we care? Do we remember? Do we commit to these conventions, or it is just history, just paper? Because it's about people, it's about us, it's about 21st century, which should, I think, and could be more humane time. And there are several issues to change or to deliver, to be more humane than it was, to be more in solidarity with the suffering people than we have been. And I think that FORP is really the way ahead, because it's the deepest expression or the way how we understand human dignity, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom to believe or not to believe, and other freedoms follow or not, if the first one is not respected. So when we gather here, it's not so much about just symbolism or memories, but really about humanity to prevail. And, I'm technician by education. This was part of the system when system tried to control what we learned. So that's why Soviets got first Sputnik, because they invested much more into MST studies. But humanity suffered. My name, Jan Figel, belonged to my uncle who disappeared in 50s. Simply this was the Stalinist approach. Есть человек, есть проблем. Нет человека, нет проблема. If there is a man, there is a problem. If there is no man, there is no problem. So simple. Inhumane. And that's why Stalinist system was inhumane. And religions and religious communities of faith or conviction suffered. So I'm speaking a bit too much, but genocide was declared by the US Congress recently. So it's not deep history. And either we care and we come to UN and do something, or it's just a repetition of the century of genocides. So we have responsibility. That's the point. We know there are instruments, we can do something, we have powers, but we have to act accordingly.
Well said. Well said. Ed, you said something kind of disturbing too, really, about that there's a pushback against human rights now. I think we all tend to think, though, that human rights just grows. It's just a natural growth that takes place, but that's not the case, is it? I mean, it's something. It's a garden that has to be tended. It's an issue that has to be pursued and aggressively and constantly.
Well, I think it's hard to deny that human rights has been pushed back from many quarters around the world. But I wake up every day. I work as human rights academic and mandate holder. I have hope. I don't go to work every day thinking that, my God, I can't win this. I go hoping that I can make a difference, even how small it is. So there are these negative trends that we've all been identifying, which are quite dark. But also, we should also look at the positive trends that are out there as well. In terms of FOB itself, if you look at this, we have now a much higher profile for this right than ever before. The Ministerial is a good example here, how we brought together such a vast number of stakeholders to look at this subject. The number of governments investing, and others on voice, or in other ways putting money to advance this. Some countries have on voice, others have, like Canada, have offices dedicated to advancing this right. But all told, more governments around the world are putting a lot more effort into this. We also have cross-faith, interfaith efforts. We have the Abu Dhabi document recently. Some of these documents may not fully comply with the human rights framework, but that's an attempt to really give a message of hope and love and compassion. We have the Marrakesh Declaration, and so a whole lot of things being done to really advance this. And if you look at the FOB world, it's a world with activity now. So there are trends we can push forward, but there are also very, very dark forces out there, including technology, which can be manipulated for dark deeds, as I said earlier. So I think, on balance, this is a moment we really have to assert ourselves to show that the good can prevail over the evil. I think we have what it takes to make sure that working together we can do that.
It's my sense that this is one of those unusual moments, and as a follower and a practitioner of politics for a number of years, you can pick up momentum or see momentum lose, and if there's not a momentum, nothing's really going to move. It just takes so much to move things. But there is a momentum on this one because there's been so much carnage. There has been so much difficulty. We heard from 3 people this morning that were involved in horrific events, and that the world leaders and people around the world saying, no, this needs to stop. So that I have that hope. And yet, Odd, I want to give this question to you. Yesterday, Pew Research released new findings that over the decade ending in 2017, government restrictions on religion These are laws, policies, actions by state officials that restricted religious belief and practices increased markedly. So in our modern time, we've got more restrictions placed by government on religious practitioners, on religious adherents. Why and how do we reverse that trend? You work a lot with governments. How do we reverse that trend?
Did you ask me?
Yes, please.
Well, I tend to agree with Ahmed that we need to be optimistic in terms of the progressing human rights. And I think, well, some of the previous speakers spoke about the media. Media has a role, social media has a role. And I think that one positive development is that governments or non-government actors, they can't get away with it anymore. So more public awareness, more information about what's going on, more pressure against governments that violate human rights, either on an individual basis or in terms of legislation and practice. I think that is the answer.
Parting thoughts, each of you. Jan, what do you want this group to hear?
What I want what?
Parting thoughts. What do you want them, what thought do you want to leave them with? You've worked in this space diligently and...
Yeah, maybe I would add to the you said dire message. Peace is fruit of justice. And justice is important for all, for ordinary polite people, but also for criminals. If we don't care for justice for perpetrators of genocides or crimes, how can we prevent the future? So justice is important for all, and this genocidal point is either we fail in all three P's, which are principles of the protection. It's prevention, protection, and punishment. Prevention of genocide, protection of victims, and then punishment of perpetrators. Or we fail, and then we see repetitions and inhumane tendencies and problems of our times. So I would call for justice to be understood as something very important for you and me, for all around, and fruits will be great, because peace is fruit of justice. And nemo dat quod non habet. You cannot give what you don't have. We can share only what we have. And if we have peace inside, if we have understanding of importance of justice, then this is the great gift, great contribution. So I wish that we educate ourselves, that we educate young and less young people for justice for all. And it means dignity for all. Thank you.
Ahmed?
Mine is linked to Ian's point here. If you go back to the first line of the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that the foundation of peace, freedom, and justice in the world is the recognition of the inherent, inalienable equality of dignity of every person and equal moral worth of every member of the human family. So to recognize our equal dignity and that we are part of the human family is vitally important to ensure that we go past this. So for my party message is, let's build bridges and recognize that by building bridges, we can overcome the negative trends that are ahead of us.
Good. Rod?
I'd like to pick up on two things that my colleagues here mentioned. Ahmed spoke about the Sustainable Development Goals and of leaving no one behind. Now, that is a political commitment that all governments have subscribed to through the UN. And secondly, Jan spoke about inclusive citizenship, rights, equal rights for all. And I think if we manage to combine those two, the development issue and the rights issue, I think then we will be on the right track.
Thank you. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Ahmed, thank you. Odd, thank you very much. Well, we've had a good start to the ministerial, and now we're going to be breaking for lunch. We've got, and we planned this way, a long lunch break, because a big part of this is really building and having a chance to talk with each other and build together. And so that's why we put it this way. It's a good chance to get to know one another. I don't really like the term networking. I like the term relationships, because I just think that's what this is really about. It's building relationships with each other, and the network and the action takes place afterwards. But if you got a relationship with somebody, then you can do something. And a relationship's a lot more fun anyway. It's a friendship. So normally we'd say, at least around my household, we'd say a grace, but considering the diverse nature of this group, I think I'll leave that to each of you to do individually. I don't think we could get that done collectively. However, I want to ask for your grace as we try to feed a record number of people here at State Department. This isn't our strong suit. We have 2 tents, so you want to listen to this. This is about the meal. We have 2 tents and enough food, but there may need to be some patience as you wait. We've got staff to help you find your way there. If you're one of the fortunate ones to get to the tents first, please proceed through to the far tent to allow others to come behind you. So, okay, there's food at the end of the tent too, and there's food at the front of the tent, but go to the end of it if you would first, to allow as many people to come on in as possible behind you. Also, as you leave the auditorium or the overflow space, please take your belongings with you. Don't leave them here or somewhere else. You need to have those with you. Excuse me. Have those with you and keep those with you at all times. We will then reconvene for the afternoon session. I'm looking at my time here. Somebody bark that out to me about, what is it? 1 o'clock? Somebody's negotiating 1:05. We're going to say 1 o'clock, knowing that it probably won't be at 1 o'clock. But we are delighted to have you here. Have a good time building those relationships and enjoy lunch.